Welcome to the GRC Summit 2021, hosted by MetricStream. My name is Sean Wong, ESG Product Line Manager. Today, I'll be going through the MetricStream ESG GRC product line. This is the newest product in the 6 product lines within MetricStream. So very excited to be here and very happy to have everyone join this session to go through the newest product. With the MetricStream product lines for risk, regulatory compliance, IT cybersecurity, third-party management, and audit. And of course, if you look at the 6 product line here on the bottom right, you will see that MetricStream ESG GRC is the latest product. And the MetricStream ESG GRC is strategically named as to be ES GRC. This is an ESG platform that's built as a natural extension to some of the greatest and longest running product in the MetricStream platform. So for example, you see some features and functionalities coming out from risk management, tracking environmental and social metrics, measuring and prioritizing some of your key risks. And of course, if you think about the disclosure standards and upcoming regulatory compliance requirements for ESG, you will see lots and lots of compliance, regulatory change, and policy setting requirements. And of course, third-party risk management and some of the upcoming internal audit and external audit requirements coming out of ESG. And of course, you see many additional and brand new features that has never been done before in terms of how do you track ESG risk metrics? How do we bring global and industry standard key metrics from some of the leading research firms into the product? So you can see lots and lots of these features in the application. So let's take a look at where we line up. So again, if you look at the 6 product line, MetricStream Environmental, Social, and Governance is a 6 product line, and it's built as a natural extension to the GRC platform. So you can see that from some of you who are familiar with MetricStream, you will be able to continue to leverage many of the existing platform features. So as you can see here from a user experience, this will be available from a mobile perspective. So that means for ESG managers or key stakeholders across the company, you can access all of your ESG data, your dashboards with your mobile device. And also for many of you that might be doing self-assessments and disclosure reporting, these are things that you can also do on your mobile devices as well. So these would include tablets, mobile phones, and many different devices from that perspective. And of course, later on in the next few releases, we will start to look at some of the AI-based recommendation in AI technology. What that means is we will be able to leverage some of the existing features, such as identifying and tracking trends using AI and machine learning on some of the key issues and key gaps, and identify the right recommendation. And of course, AI will be leveraged very heavily for metrics interpretation, understanding what are the key metrics, how to calculate and how to roll up that data for some of your key environmental and social metrics, and also disclosure management. ESG disclosure reporting is very much about content aggregation, identifying the right data, and also interpreting the right data at a very high volume. AI and machine learning will be leveraged specifically for that as well. And you'll be seeing many functionalities around library management. How do you manage multiple different frameworks across a global organization and map it into a meaningful ESG universe? You'll be seeing lots of that from a library management perspective. And of course, things like workflows, business rules, those are extremely critical for tracking ESG metrics and also identifying the right people for example, self-assessments, right? For identifying discussion and analysis topics to identify the right people to get those answers for your annual disclosures, and of course for tracking some of your key ESG goals. As you can see in the media and a lot of companies, there are lots and lots of ESG goals set by corporations, such as carbon neutral goals and also social diversity and inclusion goals for the organization. So these are all the features and functions that you can actually leverage to track all of these different things against certain metrics. Now, where did we begin? So let's talk a bit about key market trends and why we're here, why we developed MetricStream ESG GRC, and who we're actually doing this for, and what are some of the benefits to our customers. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, we want to think through some of the key market trends that's really influenced us as MetricStream, as traditionally as a GRC company. These are the key people that we're really thinking about, the key stakeholders, and also the challenges that are coming out of their needs and the changes that they're introducing into the market and how we're reacting specifically for our customer. So the first one there, and I think it's the most foundational trend in the industry, is the other consumers. So especially coming out of the pandemic in beginning in 2020, there has been lots and lots of push from consumers to hold their product and service companies accountable. So consumers are actually starting to very heavily, at an exponential rate, lean towards companies that are doing all the right things environmentally. They're not polluting, they have carbon neutral goals, and they are producing the product responsibly. And also from a social perspective, consumers are, again, also very heavily leaning towards companies that are doing all the right things with their employees, with the community that they operate in, and also with having the right diversity and social programs within their company, so that consumers are really looking at products and services companies that are really producing and sourcing their materials and services and from a responsible way. And of course, disclosure is one of the key topics as well. Consumers and actually the general public in general are interested in making sure that corporations are being transparent and disclosing the right information to the public, and they're not keeping anything behind the scenes. And of course, employees. Let's think about the employees as well. Employees prefer, and this is it's a big trend in 2020 and 2021. Employees or the people seeking the right employers are looking for employers that have strong ESG programs. They are, so again, producing their product and sourcing their services from its responsible way environmentally and socially. And we've actually seen the candidates that actually prefer companies specifically have this type of right kind of messaging or right kind of program. So that leads us to the next two, the investors and regulators. So having seen some of the trends with consumers and employees shifting towards companies that are stronger from an ESG perspective, you can naturally see that investors are starting to relocate capital away from companies that have traditionally had poor ESG rating towards ones that have stronger ESG rating. So that means companies are starting to react, right? So they need to be able to create better environmental and social programs. That typically begins with identifying the right framework, identifying the right operations and right workflows and the right people to operate in that program, and also supporting some of the public the ESG disclosure reports. Typically, if you look at investors, whether these are institutional investors or retail investors, they tend to look at public ESG disclosure reports, something that companies would annually report to display their environmental metrics, such as greenhouse gas emission, wastewater, energy usage, social data around their supply chain, how they what type of employee programs do they have in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, from a governance perspective, they would actually lean very heavily towards companies that are transparent with specific and specifically in ESG, any type of ESG related financial data. That leads us to the regulators. So the regulators are actually starting to react in terms of getting companies to disclose properly, giving them the right framework, and setting very specific mandatory requirements. So we're starting to see that in Europe. If you look at SFDR, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, that's actually one of the first mandatory disclosure requirements for companies on an annual basis. Disclose all their data, which is a very similar structure to some of the existing voluntary disclosure that we've already seen, such as SASB, GRI, and TCFD. But now SFDR, it's one of the first mandatory requirements. And of course, we'll start to see more push in the United States and in the rest of the world coming up. So we'll see that companies are starting to look at ways to, how do you track and manage and minimize your environmental impact, right? So first, it's again, identifying the right framework, the how to, and the what to track. and also keeping a healthy social relationship with your employees, suppliers, your consumers, and local communities. So these are multi-dimensional things that companies would have to look at. And what we're looking to do is to create a single platform to be able to manage all of these different topics and tackle all of these different challenges. Last but not least, on this list, there's strong governance over executive leadership, pay structure, board oversight, having the right policy. As a GRC product company, we have very, very strong features, as we talked about in the 6 product line that we've seen on the previous slide. Okay, so we'll quickly cover some of the capabilities. So these are the major 4 pillars. So capabilities, that typically includes a lot of things that you might have seen in the past already in terms of having the right frameworks and disclosure reporting, SASB, GRI, metrics management. Metrics, from again, we'll march to the name MetricStream. Metrics management is one of the longest running and one of the most innovative features that we've seen in MetricStream, and it's yet again being improved and with additional features for ESG GRC. And from a content data perspective, the MetricStream ESG GRC application will be extremely unique in the sense where we're sourcing multiple sets of data, whether these are industry risk rating, index scores, and benchmarking data, out-of-the-box framework for SASB, GRI, TCFD, and more, and also third-party ESG monitoring data. So from a supplier management, if you need to be able to track all of your supplier to make sure that they're also ESG healthy, how do we do that with one click and be able to see all of your supplier with all of the ESG intelligence, along with other types of third-party data as well? AI-powered recommendations, so we talked a bit about that, mainly focus on issue recommendation and interpreting data for the purpose of disclosure management and also executive reporting. Mobile app, and that's something that we're going to see more and more in the future, is the ability to do everything that we're seeing today in the MetricStream ESG platform and more, but entirely on your mobile device. Okay, so how does MetricStream ESG GRC work? So if you look at the left-hand side leading over to the right-hand side, these are some of the key features. And of course, we have many additional features in the application, but these are the top 4 features that I do want to talk about today. So if you look at the left-hand side here, we want to be able to focus on disclosure frameworks. How do you manage SASBs, TCFD, GRI, and SFDR as a regulatory requirement? How do we break down those frameworks, get the right interpretation, and get the right data? Enterprise metrics management. How do we identify environmental metrics, social metrics, and governance metrics from different sources, whether these are automated or manual inputs? How do we capture and gather all of that information in a single place for the purpose of disclosure reporting and also your dashboards? And of course, if you look at your ESG risk index and benchmarking, that's one of the key functionalities that everybody's talking about, specifically in the investment community. Investors are looking at your ESG index score. So in the past, if you want to compare this against your Moody's rating, investors are starting to look at the ESG risk index rating of companies to look at how healthy or how bad are they from an ESG perspective, and how do they rank compared to some of their industry peers. For example, oil and gas. Within the oil and gas industry, you'll be compared against your peers from an ESG in that ESG pillar, and of course, for the financial industry, you'll be companies will be ranked within that sub-industry. Third-party risk intelligence, we talked a bit about that. How do we track your suppliers and your third parties to make sure that they're also carbon neutral, they're doing all the right things from a social perspective, and they're also properly disclosing and being transparent with their executive data. So we'll talk about these throughout the next few minutes, but these are the key people that we would like to provide the right sets of data, right reports towards. So if you talk about the external stakeholders, typically the first one you're going to see is the general public. ESG is very much about talking to the world, making sure that you're transparent. So being able to capture the right data, capture the accurate and complete sets of information for the public, that's extremely important. And of course, investors and regulators, we've talked about that. External auditors, that's something that we're seeing a big push, especially from some of our big 4 partners, is that the external auditors are starting to think through what are some of the steps and the right framework and best practices to make sure that they can actually audit this data, very similar to other types of public disclosure, as a quarterly or annual external auditing. So more to come on that topic. Internal stakeholders, as you can imagine, the board and the C-suite executive leadership, these are the folks that will be extremely interested in ESG data in terms of identifying risks, setting the right metrics, and measuring themselves against other benchmarks and other peer companies as well. And of course, internal auditors naturally will be extremely interested in this set of data from a data quality and best practices and a third line of defense perspective. So let's take a look at the first topic here. So the first one I want to take a look at is real-time ESG intelligence. So how do we feed data from all of these different sources, so whether these are frameworks, metrics, and get it onto a single dashboard? So these are some examples of real-time dashboards that our executive users will be able to leverage. So some of your key risks that are being managed, your overall risk exposure, risks that are not being managed, be able to prioritize your top issues and your ranking across your industry peers. And of course, if you look at your overall ESG score on a real-time basis, you can have you can say one click, where's my ESG score today? Let's break it down by environmental, social, and governance. And also, how do we rank amongst our peers? Are we somewhere in the middle? Are we below average, or are we above average, performing well? And of course, you can track additional data around your other index scoring as well. And most importantly, you have the ability to track some of these key metrics on a real-time basis. So now let's talk a bit about disclosure frameworks and reporting. So these are the SASB, GRI, TCFDs of the world. As we talked about before, MetricStream ESG GRC will come out of the box with the full lineup of the select sets of ESG disclosure frameworks. So you're going to be able to, as customers, you'll be able to select specifically which framework applies to you. And of course, for the regulatory requirements, the mandatory requirements, those would be available as well. So from a framework perspective, this is something that will come out of the box as part of the application and updated on a regular basis. So it could be a real-time update based on major changes, or it could be done on a quarterly basis, so that you're always getting the right and most up-to-date sets of standards in the application. The sets of metrics that the frameworks are offered in MetricStream ESG GRC is extremely extensive. Breaks it down by individual metrics, quantitative and qualitative metrics, and also some of the interpretation and guidance coming out of these organizations. The ways we can capture data, right? So if you think about these disclosure frameworks, you see that it could be upwards of hundreds of stakeholders within your organization will be involved. So we're going to have self-assessment mechanisms and other types of automated metrics, data collection methods that we can capture this data automatically. And of course, from the ESG benchmarking and risk index the data that we're also sourcing, that information can also help you with your ESG disclosure report as well. So now at the end of your process, when you need to create your final report, we're creating a mechanism so that you can have a one-click option that gather all of that data and produce a single PDF or Word document as your draft or final report. So to make that process easier, if you're producing a 200 to 600 page report, we want to be able to make that process extremely streamlined. Okay, metrics tracking, we talked about that quite extensively. So we're going to have the ability to track metrics, whether it's on a manual collection basis, or it could be through APIs and automated collections. We're going to have the ability to calculate and roll up your ESG metrics data into meaningful risk intelligence, and then present it back to you on your ESG dashboards in an extremely meaningful way, and real-time data for your stakeholders to access, or your board and C-suite no longer have to wait a quarter to get the right information on their dashboard. Okay, risk index benchmarking, just the last topic here. This is something that we're building as a standard product. So we're actually partnering with some of the top ESG risk index firms in the industry to be able to provide the right information on your dashboard. So these are index scores and intelligence that investors would typically look at, but we're providing this data in front of our customers as well. So as corporate ESG managers and C-suite executives, you will be able to access that same data investors might be looking at. But the important part about about that is, if you have a high risk, if you have any particular risk or any material issues, you will have firsthand access to this data and be able to react to it immediately. So there will be features and functions and features and functionalities to be able to identify what is some of your key risks, why is it bad, where and how do we address it, and you can actually see that in terms of key risk areas. You can react to this information at a much more rapid rate. So you don't have to wait a quarter, wait for your half or your year to finish. As ESG managers, you can address some of these key issues immediately. All right, so here are some additional dashboards and data. Okay, so thank you very much. Thanks for joining the MetricStream ESG presentation. So again, it's a great GRC Summit for 2021. And if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out. Again, my name is Sean Wong, the head of the ESG product line management, and very excited to again present at the GRC Summit.